A hurricane has come through your area and you're without power for a couple of weeks. A snowstorm has hit you, Texas, and you are possibly looking at no power for a couple of months. The US dollar has devalued so much we're practically buying bread with a wheelbarrow full of money, talking to you post-World War I Germany. Or you've just lost your job and you have no income coming in. Can you feed your family? Can you feed your family well? Hey everyone, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia. Today we're going to be talking about a subject I'm very passionate about, why everyone should be storing up grains, and we'll talk a little bit about how you can be doing that as well. Yes, canning vegetables is wonderful. Freezing vegetables or meat and stocking up on that is wonderful as well. I'm not knocking that in the slightest. But one thing that I notice when people are prepping for disaster is that they are seriously lacking food that is A, going to give you energy so you can work harder than you've probably worked before. B, it's going to keep you healthy and satisfied. And C, food that will actually last for a very, very long time. Oh, hey. Before we dive in, super exciting announcement. I am so excited to finally be launching my brand new website, grainsandgrit.com. So go there and check it out. Sign up for my brand new newsletter that is coming out, where I give you tips and tricks, announcements before anyone else has heard them, and more. On my website, I will also have printable recipes and a shop page that features all of my favorite items. So be sure to check it out. Sign up for our newsletter and let me know what you think. Also, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe to this channel below. I post new videos every week all about healthy whole grains and how to feed your family well. So if that sounds like something you would love, then be sure to subscribe below and check out that website, grainsandgrit.com. Okay, so back to why and a little bit of how you should be storing whole grains. It's funny because many times when people hear the word prepper or prepper pantry, I think the first thing that comes to their mind is someone who is stocking up on all the guns and all the ammo and canning everything in the world that they can get their hands on to survive the end of the world. But there are so many more reasons to have a prepper pantry other than Armageddon, apocalyptic, end of the world, we're hiding underground and riding horseback because we have no fuel or electricity type of scenario. You could lose your job. How many natural disasters do we know? I'm in Florida. We are really familiar about those hurricanes that come in, can be disastrous. Hello, Andrew, Ivan, Michael, being the most recent, Opal when I was a kid. If you know, you know. They happen all the time, and suddenly everyone's running out, clearing off the grocery shelves. There's no fuel, no electricity. People are kind of panicking and expecting Big Brother, aka the government, to come in and save them, and that's just not going to happen when they need it. We also had 2020, the government issued pandemic, and things were flying off the shelves and people not able to get everything. Flour being a big part of that. Also, thanks to 2020, the US government is printing out trillions of dollars like it's going out of style without any thought to the economic impact, also known as inflation. Hello, have you tried buying lumber or groceries? If you're seeing those prices rise, it's called inflation. And these things can really impact us in our lives. So first of all, we're going to discuss why you should be stocking up on grains. And later towards the end, I will be telling you a little bit of how to stock up on grains. Before we do that, question of the day. Do you have a prepper pantry already? Do you already can things? Are you a hunter? Are you a farmer? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to find out. So why should you stock up on grains? Why is canning vegetables not enough? Let's dive in right now. Reason number one to be storing your grains. It is super ridiculously easy to do. You don't need to can them. You don't really need to freeze them. You don't need to keep them in a temperature controlled environment. You don't need them in glass jars, which can then break, which yes, I've known that to happen to some people before they lost all their canned vegetables. You don't even really need to worry about rotating them out. For the most part, we'll talk about that later. All you need to store grains is a good container, like a 5-gallon bucket with a good lid. Bottom line, they just need to be stored well away from pests and away from moisture. For wheat kernels, wheat berries, whatever you want to call them, whole and intact, you don't even need to freeze them beforehand. But again, more on that later. I've actually heard a story before of a family that stored wheat kernels in those 5-gallon buckets. They left them in their basement, and then their whole village actually had a flood or some sort of natural disaster. But because they had those grains, they were able to not only feed their family, but the whole village as well, because they were not touched. They did not get damaged. No moisture got in them, no pests, nothing. And they were able to feed their community, which is a wonderful, wonderful testimony to the greatness of grains. So again, the reason to store grains is just for the ease of it. It is super easy. You need no skills. You need to be able to lift a bag, dump it in a bucket, put a lid on it, you're good to go. All right, so let's move on to reason number 2. Reason number 2 to be storing grains. Grains, specifically wheat berries. And when I say wheat berries, I mean your hard red, your hard white, your spelt, your ancient grains, einkorn, camus, all the wheat. The reason to store them is they practically store indefinitely with minimal interaction whatsoever. Ever heard of Joseph in the Old Testament, which we will definitely get to later? They stored up grains for 7 years. They stored up for 7 years during the plenty and then famine for 7 years, and all those grains were able to be stored. No refrigeration required. They have even found wheat kernels, wheat berries in Egyptian tombs. They've taken them, they've planted them, and they grew. They still had all their nutrient value. They were still alive. You do not need to rotate wheat kernels out like you would need to do canned vegetables or just any food that we have on hand, even peanut butter. It's so important that you rotate them out so they don't go bad. You don't have to do that with wheat berries or just grains in general. Do know that certain grains like rice and corn do need a little bit of preparation before you store them long term, but again, more about that later. So again, to emphasize, the second reason to be storing grains is because they store for a long time, and you don't have to worry about rotating them out. So they're the perfect food to store for those long-term storage needs. Now, on to the big one, reason number 3. Reason number 3, you should be storing grains, and this is the one that I want to emphasize the most. Grains, specifically wheat kernels, is the most nutritious food you can get. We're gonna park it here for a little bit because I really want this point to be emphasized and for you to fully understand what I mean. I really could do an entire video about the nutrient value of grains, specifically wheat kernels, and I probably will in the future, but we're gonna try and condense this as best we can right here in this video. First of all, wheat kernels, whole, intact, not sprouted, nothing like that, just the wheat berries that you get, contains nearly all of the essential nutrients that we need to survive, and in sufficient amounts. Your green beans do not have all the nutrients that you need to live. Your broccoli does not have all the nutrients needed to live. Your meat does not have all the nutrients that we need to live. And again, I'm not knocking saving those things and storing them for a prepper pantry. My point is that if all you do is store grains, you are going to survive and thrive. Now, wheat kernels are slightly deficient in only 4 nutrients: vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D, and lysine. So what do? Now, there are some surprises when it comes to grains, and this is where I get the most excited because God designed this just so perfectly. Vitamin D is very simple to get. Just go out in the sun. Go out in the sun 15-20 minutes a day, no sunscreen, and you are going to get sufficient amount of vitamin D. Vitamin D is excellent. It's what you need for your immune system, which is why, generally speaking, in the winter months, when the sun is farther away, we're getting less vitamin D. That is why we tend to get sick a bit more, because we are lacking the vitamin D from the sunlight. Now, vitamins A and vitamin C, this is very, very cool. So typically your vitamin A, you think your beta carotene, so eat some carrots. Vitamin C, we say eat some citrus. Well, those 2 things go bad. They go bad very quickly, and they also lose their nutrients over time very quickly. But the wonderful, amazing thing about wheat berries is if you sprout them, Vitamin A increases by 300% and your vitamin C by 500%. So all you need to do to get that vitamin A and C, if you only have grains, is to sprout them. Sprout those wheat berries and you have huge amounts of vitamin A and vitamin C. In fact, sailors used to take wheat kernels on their voyages, and then as they're going, they sprout them in order to get vitamin C to combat scurvy. If you took limes, that would work, or any citrus, but that goes bad very quickly. If you're out on sea for 5 or 6 months, you're not going to have citrus that lasts that long, but your grains will last. You just sprout them and they have 500% more vitamin C, more than what you need, and the vitamin A. How cool is that? I get so excited. Now, do we have in history where people needed grains and they knew they needed the grains to actually survive even if they had other food? The answer is yes, we do have that. And we have it in God's Word. Let's now talk about the story of Joseph. So, brief Sunday school lesson of the story of Joseph. This is found in Genesis. Joseph was one of the 12 sons of Jacob, who was the son of Isaac, who was the son of Abraham. And from Jacob, he had 12 sons, or the 12 tribes of Israel. Anyway, with Joseph, he was the favorite son of Jacob because it was from his favorite wife, Rachel. And his brothers were really jealous. They wanted to get rid of him. And so they sold him into slavery. He ended up as a slave in Egypt. A lot of things happened there. He ended up in prison. A lot of things happened there. And fast forward a bit, and Pharaoh had a dream, and he needed someone to interpret it. Again, read the story in Genesis. It is an amazing, amazing story. But bottom line is they bring Joseph in because he was known as an interpreter of dreams thanks to the Lord. So Joseph comes in and he interprets the Pharaoh's dream and says, hey, you're going to have 7 years of plenty. Your crops are going to grow like crazy. But then you're going to have 7 years of famine. Pharaoh's like, oh, what do I do? And Joseph says, hey, you need to get a guy who is faithful, who is a good steward, to build up barns. And during the 7 years of plenty, you need to store away food of Egypt. So that way it can carry you through the 7 years of famine. Pharaoh said, excellent idea. You're that man. So Joseph became second in command of Egypt. So that's a little backstory there. So the 7 years of plenty happened, and they stored up a fifth of the crops. So let's read in Genesis 41, verse 49. And Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea very much, until he left numbering, for it was without number. So a little back history, if you look up Webster's 1828 dictionary, whenever it says corn in the King James Bible, it does mean grains, rye, wheat, barley, etc. So just know when I say corn, I do mean grains. Okay, so he gathered it up without number. Verse 54 says, and the 7 years of dearth began to come, according as Joseph had said, and the dearth was in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. Skip down to verse 55, and when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said unto all the Egyptians, go unto Joseph, what he saith to you do. So it's now famine. They're now freaking out. We don't have anything to eat. Hey, Joseph has bread. Egypt has bread. Go to them. Then in verse 57, it says, and all countries came into Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn, because the famine was so sore in all the lands. Amazing story. Egypt has corn. They have grains. That's wonderful. But the question, did other countries not have food at all? Did no one have any sort of food at all, and they're only eating grains because they have nothing else? Or do they know that they need grains to actually live in spite of having other food? And the Bible talks about that as well. Now, was no other food available? Was there no nuts? Was there no vegetables? Nothing else? Well, we will have to see. Let's go skip over to chapter 42. Joseph's brethren. Now, they're in the land of Canaan, not Egypt. And they are now coming into Egypt because they have heard that Egypt has grains, they have corn, they have bread, and we need some bread. So let's go into Egypt. So now we see Joseph's brethren coming into Egypt, and they do not recognize Joseph. Joseph recognizes them. They don't recognize him because he probably looks all Egyptian. Joseph starts asking questions to test them to see if they're truly repentant of what they did. I mean, they did sell them into slavery into Egypt about 20 years before this. And he finds out that, or he does confirm that they have another brother. He's testing them, and he ends up where one of the brothers has to stay in Egypt. And he says, the next time you see me, you better bring that other brother. The other brother was Benjamin, his youngest brother, which was now the new favorite son of Jacob. And he was scared to death of letting him go in case he gets torn to pieces or dies like he thinks Joseph did. And he doesn't want to lose another one of his favorite sons. So with that being said, they're now in a predicament. Joseph's brethren know that they cannot come back to Egypt unless they bring Benjamin. They have to convince their father to let go of his other favorite son, possibly risking his life in order for them to buy grain. So what do? Is that their only option? Do they possibly have other food that can sustain them? Let's find out. So in Genesis 43, it says, verse 2, and it came to pass when they, Jacob and his sons, had eaten up the corn which they had brought out of Egypt, their father Jacob said unto them, go again, buy us a little food. And the sons say, well, Dad, remember that the second in command, said that we have to bring Benjamin before we can get any corn. And Jacob still doesn't want to do that. Then verse 8, Judah, one of the 12 sons, said unto Israel, Jacob, his father, send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and thou, and also our little ones. So translation, Dad, we need to take our brother because we're going to die. We don't have any grains. But again, my whole point of this is, did they have other food? And we see that they actually had food. Verse 11, and their father Israel said unto them, if it must be so, now do this. Take of the best fruits in the land in your vessels, and carry down the man, Joseph, a present, a little balm and a little honey, spices and myrrh, nuts and almonds. They had food, y'all. They had food. And we find out later, they even had cattle. So at the very least, they could eat some meat. They had food, but they knew, again, verse 8, so we do not die, Dad, we need to go get some grains. So they had enough food to give a gift, or at the very least, they were willing to let that food go in order to get some grains, because they knew, and as many ancient cultures knew, that in order to survive, we needed grains. People knew that they could not survive, they could not thrive without grains. This is why Jesus called himself the bread of life. He did not call himself the kale of life, the broccoli of life, the almond milk or soy milk of life. He called himself the bread of life because everyone knew that it was bread that you needed to survive. It was grains. Because God created grains to be the most nutrient-dense food he has created. In it is life. It shows up in different ways in different cultures. For Asians, it's their rice. For South America, Hispanics, Latin, it is corn. Also rice as well. In America, in Europe, in the Middle East, wheat has always been king. Wheat, barley, rye, the wheat kind has been our grains. And every culture knows that they needed it to survive. That's why they would always have festivals when the barley harvest was in or the wheat harvest was in, because it was a celebration knowing that they were going to survive. They were going to live through the coming winter, through the coming year. That is why if all that you do is stock up on wheat and beans and make sure you can get out in the sun, you're going to survive and you're going to thrive. What happens if you become deficient in a nutrient? You get sick. What happens if you cannot seek medical treatment for various reasons, a disaster, they're not accepting you into the hospital because you haven't been vaccinated or you don't have a mark on your head or your hand. You don't want to get sick in times like this. You want to be able to thrive and you want to be able to be healthy. Wheat and whole grains also contain fiber, which is so important for you to cleanse out your system. The things that your body doesn't need, you need the fiber. And again, I could do a video just on the fiber content of grains, but just trust me on this. You need fiber to cleanse your body out. You do not want to be constipated in a survival situation, and you don't want to have the other thing or dysentery or anything crazy like that. So that's why you need fiber. So to conclude, the reason number 3, stock up on grains, have you some beans for that lysine, sprout your wheat for the vitamin A and the vitamin C, and be sure that you live in a place that has sunlight that you can get for 15-20 minutes a day for your vitamin D. For my family, we would go through so many canned vegetables in order to feed us sufficiently every single day. But with grains, you don't need as much to be full, to be satisfied. Now, let's switch up this camera. Let me calm down a little bit. And let's talk about how we can store these wonderful whole grains. Now let's talk about how to be storing those grains. I have talked about this in my How to Start Milling Your Own Grains video. I will link that up here. But for the sake of this video, we're going to quickly run through it again and possibly give some information that I didn't give in that video. So I've already touched a bit on how to be storing your grains. Basically, you just need a really good container, like a 5-gallon bucket, a really good lid, and you're generally good to go. But certain items need a little bit more attention. First of all, grains like wheat berries, such as hard red, hard white, your spelt, your einkorn, kamut, oat, groats, which we'll talk about the difference with that later. It doesn't matter what type, so long as they are unsprouted, they're not wet, they're not ground into flour, nothing like that. It's just the wheat kernels completely intact. Really simple. Buy it 25, 50-pound bags. Again, I have it listed below, and my website, grainsandgrit.com, where I purchase my grains. You just take it out of the bag, you dump it in the bucket, pretty good lid on it, and again, you're good to go. It's quite simple. It doesn't really even need to be talked about, but that's how I store it. You don't even have to rotate it. You don't need it in a temperature controlled environment. You can actually store them out in your garage, your shed, in your house, whatever it is. You just need to make sure that it is kept dry and pest free. For me, I generally do rotate out my wheat berries just because I'm always using them, so why not? But if you are not going through them, or you just want to keep extra on hand in a good location and leave it alone, that's the beauty of wheat berries, is you can do that. Now with things like cut oats or rolled oats, not the oat groats. Again, the oat groats kind of look like wheat berries. It's what they get right off the plant, and they can store for a very long time. But once they're rolled, they are cut, they're opened up in some way, they start losing the nutrients a bit, and they will go bad a lot quicker. So I do recommend rotating those out. For me, we go through a lot of oatmeal around here. I like buying the cut oats, so I just buy them in 25, 50-pound bags, put them in a bucket, and then just keep rotating those out as I use them. For rice and corn, those starchy type grains, you do need and want to freeze them for a good 24 hours before you just dump them in a bucket, because they have, as gross as this sounds, these little mites that are in them that really like starch. And eventually they will hatch, start eating said starch, and you open up your buckets, and there's a lot of these black little bugs, and it's really gross. Ask me how I know. So you definitely want to freeze them. Again, just throw them in about 24 hours, and then I just dump them in my buckets. And also, to be on the safe side, I rotate through these as well. But especially for long-term storage, freeze them, put them in the buckets, and you should be good to go. Same as the grains. But as always, if you're using them, just go ahead and rotate them out, just to be on the safe side. For beans, I do recommend dried, because if they're canned, they've been cooked a little bit, they will expire. Rotate to be safe. Conflicting information is out there about beans. Remember, they are seed. We save seeds all the time. The USDA says that about 1 or 2 years, dried beans are no longer good. But again, we can take what the USDA says with a grain of salt. Some people say that after about 3 to 5 years, they start losing nutrients, that they're good until 25 or 30 years. Again, just do your research, but again, just rotate them out. Just buy the beans that you like to use. For me, my favorites are red beans, like kidney or the red beans. We go through a lot of black beans around here, a lot of pinto beans, and a lot of the white beans, so your navy and your lima. Those are the beans that I just always keep on hand. I have a list for my pantry. I keep a certain amount on hand at all times, and then as I use them, I'm just rotating them out. But again, it's beans that we're already using. I keep a good amount on hand just in case, but I'm also just continuously rotating through them as well. As always, with any type of food, no matter if it's grain, vegetable, whatever, if there's mold on it or it smells bad, toss it. Don't risk your life eating that, even in a survival situation. Overall, for anything in your prepper pantry, whether it be canned, frozen, stored in grain bins, whatever it is, store what you like. If you hate beets, don't store them. Why would anyone want to be in some sort of survival situation where it's already really tense, already really stressful? And trust me, if you live in the South and we don't have electricity for our air conditioning and it's summertime, we are stressed and we are miserable and we are cranky. Let's not add to that by making everyone eat things that they hate, like beets. As you can tell, I'm not a huge fan of beets. Remember, storing up food is not just for the end of the world scenarios. Disaster strikes multiple times throughout our lives. You can lose a job, a natural disaster happens, government can cause economic disasters all by themselves. It never hurts to be prepared, and the beauty of whole grains is that it's easy and cheap to go ahead and stock up right now. And you can go ahead and be using them right now. It's not like powdered eggs. I mean, who's gonna have powdered eggs on a daily basis when they can just have real eggs that are nice and fresh? Grains you can already consume. I do on a daily basis. We make bread, pancakes, muffins, consume beans and rice, all those things. You can go ahead and do that now, so you already know what to do with them if a disaster strikes and they're the only things that you are relying on. Plus, another beauty about grains is because it feeds people so well. It's the perfect food to have plenty on hand to not only feed your family well, but also to help others in need, which is really great to have in a disaster setting. When that community, when we come together and we got to help each other out, there's no beautiful way to love your neighbor than by feeding them when they're hungry. Another thing to add, while I like to talk about whole grains on this channel, I want to always be pointing you to the true bread of life, Jesus Christ. More important than preparing for disaster in this world that can be temporary is to make sure that your soul is prepared for eternity. Disasters are temporary, eternity is forever. Do you have a relationship with the bread of life? If you have any questions about the gospel, please comment below or send me an email or message me. I would love to talk with you more about it. As always, thank you so much for watching. God bless and have a great day, and I'll see you next week.